Hey, what's up guys, it's BenBonk and welcome back to the 55th Slimekeep Devlog. In this devlog, I added a bunch of new slime pet upgrades to the game. Also, if you're new here, Slimekeep is a fast-paced roguelike where you must kill and capture slimes to stop the corruption that has infected your land. Without further ado, let's get into it. Now, before getting into the big stuff, for a long time I received feedback from you guys that the world in Slimekeep didn't feel alive enough and that there needed to be more life overall. So one idea that was suggested to me was the concept of NPCs that would appear randomly in rooms that you could talk to. I really liked this idea and saw it as an opportunity to add some small storylines into the game, so I got to work. First, I headed into Sprite and created this adventurer NPC guy. Then I spent some time setting him up in Unity and deciding what I wanted him to do exactly. Eventually, I thought it'd be cool that this guy would have a persistent quest across days in the game, and you could find him and talk to him every few days to progress the quest. As for what this quest is, well, basically this adventure guy is just like you and is set off to defeat the Slime King. He has his own short storyline and cool stuff that he can do that I won't spoil right now, but yeah, that's the adventure NPC. Now, while this was a great start, I also wanted to add in at least one other NPC, so with the help of some art from the myths in my Discord, I created this statue NPC. He's pretty similar to the adventure NPC, and you can talk to him if you manage to find him randomly spawned throughout a level. He also has his own mini quest thing, which I think is pretty cool, so yeah, those are the two new NPCs in the game. Moving on, let's briefly talk about weapons and ammo in the game. I got some feedback that getting weapons early on was a little difficult as of now. So to fix this, I added in a guaranteed chest room that would spawn on day 1 as a reward for the player exploring. This chest would drop a basic weapon to help the player out in the early game and give them a bit of a boost. And staying on the topic of weapons, another pretty important thing I did was double the ammo capacity for all weapons in the game. Previously, weapons would run out of ammo fairly quickly, and many players found this really annoying, so I think this change helped alleviate this. But to balance things out a bit, I did end up changing the ammo drops in the game to not spawn full ammo drops after clearing rooms, as previously this would happen every now and then, and I just thought it was a little overpowered, and made more sense to limit these items to shops. And speaking of shops, I actually increased the spawn rate of shops in the game. Instead of having a random upgrade or weapon shop spawn every other day, I made it so one of these shops will spawn every day. This definitely helped the player overall and gave them so many more opportunities to put their hard-earned slime balls to work. Okay, so those changes that I just talked about were pretty minor and nothing crazy, so let's switch gears and talk about a pretty huge change. See, for the past few months, I've been getting pretty consistent feedback from my playtesters that the slime pet just didn't feel strong enough, and it was getting pretty boring choosing the same upgrades for him every run. See, if you don't know, instead of killing slimes in Slimekeep, you have the option to capture them and feed them to your slime pet to upgrade him. The thing is, previously, the upgrades you could purchase for your slime pet were static. They never change, and you'd always have this identical looking upgrade tree, which got a bit boring over time. Everyone seemed to want more variety to make things more exciting and not make every run with your slime pet feel the same. So I listened to the people and got to work creating a bunch of new upgrades that would randomize the upgrade tree. See, the plan was instead of just having one static upgrade option for this tier 3 upgrade option for example, there would be 3 options total. So when you start a new run, the game will randomly select one of those 3 options, and that will be what you will be able to purchase. This way, every run will have a unique combination of slime pet upgrades that won't feel the exact same. Now, this sounded really promising, but before I got to work to create a ton of new slime pet upgrades, I needed to set up the Slimeinator tree to handle randomized upgrades. Now, this may sound relatively simple, but because I created this slime pet upgrade system ages ago and didn't intend for it to ever support upgrade randomization, it actually was not simple at all. Long story short, I basically needed to rework the whole upgrade system. We've now got this code here that would allow me to randomize the upgrades in the tree at the start of the game that I can specify in a list. I also had to change how upgrade purchasing works, which was a bit of a pain, but hey, after a few days or so, I got the system up and running, and now it's time to actually make all the new upgrades. And this took quite a while, as my goal was to make 6 new upgrades for each upgrade category in the game. 2 additional tier 1 upgrades, 2 additional tier 2 upgrades, and 2 additional tier 3 upgrades. And because there are 5 upgrade categories total, I was aiming for 30 new slime pet upgrades, which is over double the current amount, so let's get to work. First up, let's start with the ranger category. These upgrades are focused on ranged attacks and just anything to do with projectiles. For the first tier 1 upgrade, I made friendly fire, which gives the ranger slimes a chance of targeting the pet instead of the player. This is nothing crazy, and it just gives the player a bit more wiggle room in combat, but at the end of the day, it's just a tier 1 upgrade. Then for the second tier 1 ranger upgrade, we had Ranger Slayer, which gives the slime pet +2 attack damage to ranger type slimes. Then moving up the tier 2 upgrades, which are just a tad bit stronger, we first had Poison Goop, which gives the projectiles that the pet can sometimes shoot, if you purchase certain tier 1 upgrades, the ability to inflict poison onto slimes. And now for its counterpart, Chili Goop makes projectiles shot by the slime pet temporarily freeze slimes. Now moving up to the exciting stuff with the Ranger tier 3 upgrades, we first had Jorb Slime, which gives the pet the ability to periodically deploy turrets. This one is pretty sick because you'll just be fighting and then all of a sudden the pet spawns a bunch of turrets that just aid you in combat. Then for the other Ranger tier 3 upgrade, we had Armed Ally, which is probably my favorite new slime pet upgrade that I've made. With this upgrade, the player can now pick up weapons that the player drops and use them to fight in combat. So let's say for example, I have this plasma rifle weapon that I don't really need anymore. Well, now with this upgrade, I can drop this weapon to my pet and he'll pick it up. Then whenever I, the player, shoots, the pet will also shoot towards my cursor. This just creates a sick effect and results in bullets flying from all different kinds of angles. It also leads to some really sick synergies, because, well, the pet will shoot whenever you shoot and doesn't have any reload time or ammo. This means, let's say I give the pet a sniper, a very powerful weapon that does high damage with a long cooldown. But then let's say I have a machine gun with low damage and a high fire rate. Well, basically, I can shoot this machine gun, and the pet sniper will fire bullets at a similar capped fire rate of the machine gun, creating for some crazy DPS. Maybe this is a bit too broken, I don't know, let me know what you think, but I just think it's really fun to let players discover this. And I think it's fun that you can discover the link in the description to wishlist Slimekeep on Steam. If you haven't done this yet, please do. It helps a ton with the Steam algorithm and would mean a ton to me. Anyways, that's all the Ranger upgrades I made, so let's move on to the Brute upgrades, which involve damage output and strength. For the tier 1s, firstly we have Foliage, which makes it so the slime pet gains 0.05 damage for every broken obstacle / decoration in a room. And this resets upon sleeping to progress to the next day / level. Personally, I think this one's pretty cool because it actually gives all these leaves and pots and everything destructible a use and changes how the player thinks about them and interacts with them. Then we also have Brute Slayer, which gives the slime pet +2 attack damage against brute type slimes. Moving on to the tier 2s, we have Maul, which gives the pet +2 attack damage overall, but at the cost of decreased attack speed. We also had Metronome, which is pretty cool because it makes it so the slime pet gains 0.5 attack damage temporarily when hitting the same slime in a row. So if the first attack to a slime does 1 damage and the pet attacks the same slime, the next attack will do 1.5 damage. And if this continues, the pet will do 2 damage, 2.5 damage, 3 damage, and so on. So this upgrade is just pretty powerful overall at dealing with single enemies. Now moving on to the tier 3s, we've got Relentless Rage, which just gives the slime pet a chance to go ham towards a single enemy, dealing massive damage. And we've also got Late Game Scaling, which simply makes it so the pet gains an extra 0.25 damage per day slept. Nothing crazy, but just overall a very solid upgrade. Now moving on, let's talk about the Assassin type upgrades, which involve even more damage output and quick attacks. For our tier 1s, here we've got Assassin Slayer, which as you guessed, gives +2 attack damage to Assassin type slimes. We've also got Swift Slime, which increases the pet's attack speed. Then for our tier 2s, we've got Watch Your Step, which lets the pet place traps on the ground after attacking. These traps deal decent damage and are just a nice passive buff overall. Then for our second tier 2, we've got a pretty sick one called Grapple Buddy, which whenever the pet attacks an enemy, the player can then press their interact key to grapple towards the pet's location. I'm not sure how useful this one actually is, but it's pretty fun, so oh well. Anyways, moving on to our new Assassin tier 3s, we first have Assassin's Mark, which makes it so whenever the player attacks an enemy, that enemy will become marked. Then whenever the pet attacks an enemy, it'll deal damage to that enemy and all marked enemies, making this upgrade a really solid room clearer. And for the other Assassin tier 3, we have Undercover Ambush, which gives the pet a chance to disappear in the shadows and unleash attacks on many slimes at once. It basically just does a bunch of damage, and yeah, is another solid room clear. But moving on to specialty upgrades, which tend to buff the player's slime capturing abilities, we first have Specialty Slayer, which as usual gives +2 attack damage to specialties type slimes. But we also have Loot Boot, which makes it so the loot of captures with a loot bar is doubled, as right now there's a chance for loot to spawn when capturing a slime if you time your release just right. Moving on to the tier 2s, we had Safety Surge, which after a successful capture, the player will now gain 5 seconds of invincibility, and Friendship, in which hugging the pet causes it to be buffed for a short time, once per day. Then for the tier 3 specialty upgrades, we had Golden Gun, which makes it so the capture gun would also gain 50% of the slime balls you'd gain from killing slimes. So basically just a passive income generator. And we also had the Line, which is an interesting one as it creates this kind of damaging line between the player and the pet that deals damage to whatever crosses through it. Now finally moving on to our final set of upgrades, thanks for sticking with me, we had passive upgrades which don't necessarily buff the pet's attack, but rather buff him in other ways. Passive Slayer is an exception to this though, and gives +2 attack damage to passive type slimes. But then we also had Brisk Boots giving increased pet move speed, and then for our tier 2s we had Collector giving the pet a chance to dig up upgrades/items after clearing a room, which is pretty neat, and Guardian giving the pet a chance to block damage to the player if they're in close enough proximity to the pet. And finally, for our tier 3 passive upgrades, we first had Deadly Aura, which allows the pet to deal tick damage to slimes within an aura area. And its counterpart, Booster Aura, makes the player deal double damage while in this aura. Overall, both pretty cool and solid upgrades. But yeah, that's all the upgrades I'd made for the new slime pet upgrade tree. And once setting everything up, you can see that when I start a new run, the tree will look like this and be completely randomized. And if I start another run, it will look very different, which I really think does help a ton with replayability. So boom, there we go, and that's all I have for this devlog. Please do let me know what you think of all these new upgrades, as I know it's a lot. Anyways, thanks for watching, don't forget to smash the wishlist button on Steam, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.